Welcome back to the basement. Imagine this, you finally retire, no alarm clock, no commute, no boss. You spent years thinking about this moment, and then 6 months later you realize you might have to go back to work. Not because you're bored, not because you suddenly miss Monday morning meetings, because the retirement you planned for isn't the retirement you're actually living. And this is happening to more people than you might think. In fact, about 1 in 6 retirees have either already returned to work or are seriously considering it. There's even a name for it now. It's called Unretirement. But here's what I find really interesting. It's not always about money. For some retirees, absolutely, the bills are higher than expected. Inflation took a bigger bite than they planned for. Their retirement savings aren't stretching out as far as they thought they would. But other retirees are going back because they're lonely. They're bored. They miss having somewhere to go. They miss being needed. And that's the part of retirement planning that almost nobody talks about. We spend decades asking, will I have enough money to retire? Maybe we should also be asking, what am I going to do when I get there? Today, we're going to look at why retirees are going back to work, who's being hit the hardest, and 5 questions I think you should answer before you retire. Because going back to work isn't necessarily a failure, but being forced back because you never planned for the possibility. That's something I'd like to help you avoid. So let's get into it. There's a tendency to think of retirement as a finish line. You work for 30 to 40 years, you save, you invest, maybe you pay off the house. Then one day you cross the finish line and you're done. Woohoo! Except that's apparently not how it's working out for everybody. A significant number of retirees are either going back to work or considering it. And one statistic really got my attention. Did you know about 6% of retirees reportedly re-entered the workforce in just a 6-month period? Think about that. That's not a slow change happening over 20 years. Those are people making the decision relatively quickly. And presumably, at least for some of them, something changed. Maybe retirement costs more than they expected. Maybe the market didn't cooperate. Maybe inflation changed the math. Or maybe they discovered that sitting at home wasn't nearly as fulfilling as they imagined it would be. That finish line they had pictured for decades, maybe it wasn't actually a finish line. Maybe it was just a water station, and there was another chapter after it. I'm not telling you this to scare you out of retiring. Quite the opposite. I'd rather think about these problems before retirement than discover them at 68 when our options may be a lot more limited. Let's start with the obvious one, money. Almost 4 in 10 people going back to work say covering basic expenses is one of the main reasons. And when I say basic expenses, I'm not talking about taking a cruise. I'm talking about groceries, utilities, insurance, property taxes, and car repairs. The things that show up whether you're retired or not. And this is where retirement planning can get dangerous because we tend to build retirement plans around averages. Average inflation, average investment returns, average healthcare costs, average household expenses. But unfortunately, life doesn't happen in averages. Your furnace doesn't care that you had a perfectly balanced retirement spreadsheet, like I do. Neither does your transmission, and neither does the stock market. One of the statistics that really jumped out at me was that roughly 1 in 5 retirees said they hadn't anticipated how much retirement would actually cost. That's important because that's not necessarily an income problem, it's a planning problem. And planning problems are exactly what we're trying to find before they become 2 a.m. staring at the ceiling problems. But money isn't the entire story. And I think this part gets overlooked. Some retirees aren't going back because they need the paycheck. They're going back because they miss work. Maybe not the boss, maybe not the commute, and definitely not the meetings that should have been emails. But they miss something. Structure, people, responsibility, feeling useful. Almost a quarter of people going back to work cite loneliness or social disconnection as part of the reason. And I think this one can sneak up on us. Because you can run the numbers on a retirement budget. It's a lot harder to run the numbers on, I don't know what to do with myself anymore, or I miss feeling useful. Nobody puts that into a retirement calculator. We spend so much time building the financial plan that sometimes we forget to build the life plan. Think about what work provides. You wake up at a certain time. People expect you somewhere. You have problems to solve. People ask for your opinion. You have coworkers, customers, friends. And then one Friday you retire. Monday morning comes and nobody needs anything from you. At first, wow, that probably feels fantastic. 6 months later, it might feel completely different. And I think that's worth planning for just as much as whether your 401k lasts until you're 90. And here's where unretirement gets complicated. Because saying, well, I'll just go back to work if I need to, sounds like a pretty good backup plan until you actually have to do it. Nearly 2/3 of older workers say they believe finding another job would be difficult, and a third say it would be very difficult. And one of the biggest concerns? Age discrimination. That's something we don't like talking about, but it's real. There's also health, technology changes, industries change, skills change, and sometimes the job you left 5 years ago doesn't even exist in the same form anymore. That's why I don't particularly like the idea of I'll just work longer as the entire backup retirement plan. Maybe you can, but what happens if you can't? That's the question that matters. And this is where the subject becomes a little more personal. I'm retired. I spend a lot of time thinking about what comes next. I make these videos. I have projects. I have things that give me a reason to get up and do something. And like a lot of people, I've thought about what going back to a traditional job might look like, especially during major life changes. There's something comforting about predictable income. You know what's coming every month. But for me, returning to a traditional job isn't really an option because of medical limitations. And strangely enough, that makes the subject even more important to me. Because when returning to work isn't your backup plan, you start thinking a lot harder about whether your retirement plan can survive the unexpected. And that's really the point I want to make. Going back to work after retiring doesn't mean that you've failed. I don't agree with that at all. Sometimes going back is the smartest decision someone can make. Maybe you want extra money. Maybe you want to travel more. Maybe you miss being around people. Maybe somebody offers you a job you actually enjoy. Great, that's a choice. What concerns me is when someone has to go back because there simply isn't another option. Those are two very different kinds of unretirement. One is, I want to work. The other is, I have to work. And I'd like us to plan for the first one while doing everything we can to avoid the second. So I've come up with 5 things I think we should consider before we retire. Number 1, let's go ahead and stress test our money. Don't build your retirement around the perfect year. Ask yourself, what happens if inflation stays high? What happens if the market drops 20% right after I retire? What happens when the roof needs replacing? What happens if there's a $5,000 medical expense? You don't need to predict exactly what will go wrong. You just need a plan that assumes something eventually will. Number 2, have a purpose plan. Don't just ask, what am I retiring from? Ask, what am I retiring to? Maybe it's volunteering, travel, grandkids, woodworking, golf, starting a YouTube channel from your basement. Whatever it is, have something, because there's a big difference between having free time and having nothing but free time. Number 3, keep your skills current. Even if you don't plan on working again, don't completely disconnect from the world you've spent decades learning. Keep your network. Keep learning. Stay comfortable with technology. Maybe do some consulting. Maybe work part-time for a while. You don't have to keep one foot in the office, but I wouldn't throw away the key either. Number 4, know why you'd go back. Ask yourself this before retirement. Under what circumstances would I go back to work? Money, purpose, social connection, a great opportunity, and what circumstances would not be enough? That's a much easier question to answer when you're calm than when you're worried about paying bills the next month. Number 5, review the plan every year. Retirement planning isn't something you finish the day you retire. Things change. Your spending changes. Your health changes. Markets change. Your family changes. And sometimes you change. So once a year, sit down and ask, does this retirement still work? Not just financially, does this life still work? So if you take one thing away from this video, I want it to be this. Unretirement isn't really the story. It's the symptom. The real story is that a lot of people build retirement around their best case scenario and then have to live through an average year or sometimes a really bad one. Going back to work isn't a failure. If you want to work again, fantastic. If working gives you purpose, community, extra money, or just something interesting to do, I think that's great. But I don't want any of us sitting in a job interview at 68 thinking, I never thought I'd have to do this again. And that's why we need to stress test retirement before we get there. If you'd like me to make a video showing exactly how to stress test a retirement plan, let me know. Just put stress test in the comments. If enough of you want it, that'll be one of the next videos I make. And I'd also really like to hear from those who have already retired. Did you go back to work? Have you thought about it? Was it because of money? Or did you discover that you actually missed working more than you expected? Those stories really could help somebody else out and help them make the same decision. Thanks for spending a little time with me down here in the basement. If this is the kind of retirement and money conversation you're interested in, hit that subscribe button. And If you'd like to see some more videos like this, go ahead and click on this one right here. And I'll see you in the next one.